Welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr, and I'm the founder of the Women at the Top Network, and I'm going to be your host today. For those of you who don't know us or are joining us for the first time, Women at the Top is a community of like-minded women who share the WAT vision and mission. And our goal, simply put, is to empower aspiring women to lead. And we do this in a couple of ways, by providing information, training, and connections. And joining me today is Jackie Hilgert, COO and Editor-in-Chief of BankBeat magazine. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about Jackie. Jackie Hilgert is Editor-in-Chief of BankBeat magazine, a journal that serves the banking industry, where she leads a team of talented journalists and other professionals. BankBeat is published by NFR Communications, for which Jackie serves as the COO. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in Individualized Studies from Metropolitan State University in St. Paul by designing her own degree entitled The Business of Writing. And Jackie earned a Master's of Fine Arts degree in Literary Nonfiction in 2017. Though she spends much of her time these days managing people and editing the work of others, she is first and foremost a writer. Creating narratives, Jackie says, enhances a person's ability to think critically. To be successful, writers must trust the messy and sometimes frustrating revision process. On that note, welcome to our program today, Jackie.
Thanks so much, Regina. I'm happy to be here.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Jackie and I have known each other for a long time, so I've had the privilege of seeing Jackie's career evolve. So I want to get started with a couple of questions about your role. You've been in your current role since January of 2018, but you previously worked for the company for 13 years. You took a hiatus, I think it was about 10 years, to start your own communications company, and then you rejoined the company in 2018. So my guess is that's an interesting story right here. So tell us a little bit about your journey, Jackie.
Right. Well, actually, there's quite a few interesting stories about that 10-year hiatus, but we'll focus in on the professional piece of it. NFR Communications, which is a company that publishes BankBeat, it's a small company. It's now larger than it was, and it's growing. But at the time, it was a small company, and as you know, with small firms, you have an opportunity to do all kinds of different things. So I came in 1996 as a part-time designer and kind of worked my way up to art director. Then I had a chance to switch over to the editorial side, starting as a beat reporter and working my way up through to become managing editor. And then I also, just being in part of the business, knew and was learning the business side of publishing and dabbled in some different things and ended up as the associate publisher. So it was a great opportunity to learn all kinds of things. In each of these roles, I could see the impact that I was making on my colleagues, on the firm, on the market, and on myself. But I also knew, as kind of was in my middle 40s, that there was probably something else out there for me to learn. And so I felt like I needed to kind of strike out on my own to find that whatever. So I did. I left in 2008 and started my own communications consultancy.
Wow. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize the thought that has to go into that, and that there's a high level of risk. I mirror your thinking there, that there was something else. I also left the corporate realm to start my own business, so I can relate to that desire to try something different or do more or stretch yourself in new ways. So that's great. Yeah. That's fabulous.
Yeah, well, and I just, I'm kind of the kind of person that's always seeking to acquire experiences and knowledge. And so that is kind of like the impetus for getting out there. And I am very comfortable with risk, which is probably why I do well in a small company, have an entrepreneurial streak. And so the timing of it was a little unfortunate, leaving in 2008 as the economy kind of collapsed, but made it work.
Yes, and that sometimes happens, right? We make certain assumptions, and then who knows, the universe speaks to us in different ways or throws some different curveballs at us. And then it's what you do with the curveballs. And I think you have successfully managed those curveballs. Unlike some people, I think, who sit back and they wait to see what unfolds in their careers. You and I are like-minded in that entrepreneurial spirit, if you will. And so sometimes I see people don't consciously think about success. And when they do, it's as if it's somewhat removed from them. So to me, success is more of a mindset, if you will. When you hear that phrase, expect success, what comes to mind for you? And did you always expect success for yourself?
Well, it's a really interesting question to ponder. And no, did I always expect success? Absolutely not. In fact, I was raised in a troubled household, and I really wasn't. There was really no expectations placed on me. I was kind of labeled as a dreamer, pejorative dreamer, and that my mother didn't know what to do with that, right? So it was both kind of liberating for me because she didn't have expectations like, oh, my daughter's going to be an architect or a doctor or something. She just kind of dismissed and to go out and find it on my own. But I think about, expecting success as, that phrase. It's almost feels almost a little bit arrogant, like, oh, I'm so good at what I do, I should expect nothing but success. And I think success and failure are like two sides of the same coin. And when I think about expecting success, I think personally I want to expect that I will find lessons in whatever I do. And even if whatever I do leads me to failure, the lesson is the success that comes out of that. And so that allows me to take risks and try things that maybe others wouldn't try or don't understand, because I know that ultimately the nugget of the experience is the lesson that I can internalize and then apply to something else down the road.
I think that's a great way to look at that. And perhaps if more people looked at it that way, they would be willing to take more risk. And I remember back when I moved to Minnesota, I have to tell you, people thought I was nuts and they thought I was this great risk taker. And I, I remember thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm just moving. If I don't like it in my head, I was always telling myself I can always move back. It's not permanent. There's nothing saying that I'm going to be stuck in this place, which by the way, I moved here in the fall, 77 degrees in New York. I got off the plane, it was 32 degrees and I still stayed. So worth the risk, clearly.
Good for you. Well, the world is filled with naysayers, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Now more than ever, I think we have all had to learn how to navigate in these uncertain times. I can't think of another time in my career when there has been as much uncertainty as we've experienced over the last 2 years. And it seems like those who have faced uncertainty before, not unlike yourself or myself, that we may have been a little bit better prepared for what COVID unleashed on all of us. So, is there a time when you had to pivot to overcome adversity? And if yes, what did you learn about yourself?
Oh, well, I would say there's been lots of times where I've had to overcome adversity. Professionally, thinking about leaving a job in 2008 in May, and I think I think it was fall, September, October, when the economy just started falling apart. And so when I left, my business plan was to start working on book length narratives and offer services to high net worth individuals to do family histories or personal histories or institutional histories, costly products. And so as the economy collapsed, people were more interested in preserving their assets than they were in preserving their stories. So it was a little bit of a tough sell in the first couple of years. So I had to pivot to provide just general communication services. I was very fortunate that I brought on my former employer as one of my main clients and kept that relationship going, which is a lesson of don't burn bridges. And just because you leave doesn't mean you can't have a good relationship with your former employer. And then I also, I when I launched that business, I moved to a different area where I knew absolutely no one. And so I forced myself to get out into the community and make some connections. And I did. And that allowed me to branch into different kinds of writing that I hadn't tried before, such as grant writing. And it's just taught me that, I can do things that I set my mind to. All good lessons.
Yes. And I think that is a good lesson. I think most of us, when we do put our minds to something, we find that we have more skills and more uh, strength, if you will, in persevering when sometimes those times don't go quite how we had hoped. And I always like to joke around, people plan, God laughs, right? Because I'm a planner. I lay out a plan and then I crack up when I'll look at the plan and sometimes not one thing has gone how I planned. But what I tell people is the more I plan, the easier it is to pivot because I feel more prepared. And I don't know if that's your experience as well, but that's what it's been like for me as someone who's taken a number of risks myself.
Yes, well, it's true. And I think, and I know you've talked about this, having confidence in addition to competence. I think the two go hand in hand. And the more you can accomplish and achieve things, the more confidence you get. And then you can take that into new areas as you kind of embark into things that you haven't maybe achieved a full competence, but you can fake it till you make it, maybe.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm big on the fake it till you make it. I know some women would say, well, then I have imposter syndrome. And, when you talk to a lot of the guys, guess what? They're faking it till they make it. So I'm all about fake it till you make it.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about the world we live in today. Very fast paced. People are very much about instant gratification. And I think we've lost some of this fine art of stick to itiveness. And yes, I did look it up, and it is a word. It means dogged perseverance or tenacity. Could you tell us a little bit about a time when you may have stayed the course or stuck something out when things got tough or uncomfortable? Because I hear that sometimes from clients. And what were the benefits to you for doing that?
Okay, well, as a writer, anybody who writes knows that if you're writing something that's more than a blog post, you're going to get muddled down and kind of stuck in the narrative. And I've produced some rather substantial, lengthy pieces. My master's thesis was more than 300 pages. Yeah, and so when I think about writing something of that length, it's very easy to get lost and it's very easy to ditch it. And I have heard that when you're writing a long piece, it's kind of like driving at night, where you can't see your destination, but you can visualize it. You kind of know where you're going. Can't see it. All you can see is what's illuminated by your headlights. So the 20, 30, 40 feet in front of you. So if you focus on what's immediately in front of you and not kind of let the rest of it or the weight of it, crash in on you, then you can find and muster the courage to keep moving forward incrementally and celebrate those incremental wins and then just stick to it. Stick to itiveness. That's a word that I need to work into to my next magazine. So that when you do that, then that really, it fortifies your confidence, and it helps you see that you can take on big tasks that maybe are bigger than yourself. And it's quite rewarding when you come out on the other side and you've got something that you can hold in your hand that's something you can share with your family or share with your friends, or just stick it on a shelf and say, hey, I created that.
And sometimes that's enough,
Mm-hmm.
creating it for yourself or doing something for yourself. It doesn't always have to be for, if you will, public consumption.
That's
So
correct.
I completely agree with what you've said. I'm going to share a quote from you. You said, writing is craft. Writing becomes only art when one becomes a master of the craft. And I think the same can be true for our careers. And I've been a lifelong learner, just like you have been. And I know that you've called your educational journey non-traditional. So what advice can you offer to those who want to master their craft, whether it's their career or some other passion?
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, you have to cut yourself some slack in the beginning. You have to allow yourself to be bad at something before you can get good at something. And you can't just walk into a painter studio and sit down in front of a canvas, having never painted before, having never studied painting, and expect to produce a masterpiece. So you have to give yourself um, some grace, I guess, in the beginning. I think you have to turn off the critic, the internal critic, and shut out the naysayers who maybe will scoff at your ambition or your dreams. Certainly, I've had to do that. And then you have to do the work of preparing and studying. And when I say writing is a craft and you have to master the craft, that means you have to, as a writer, if you want to write a memoir, for instance, you have to read memoirs and you have to take memoir writing classes, and maybe you have to put together a writer's group filled with other people who are similarly or aspiring to write a memoir. And so there's no easy way to achieve. You have to do the work. And but if you're interested and if it's a passion, it shouldn't be work. It should be joy, right? You should enjoy it. So I think that's part of it, is just getting in and rolling up your sleeves and just kind of immersing yourself in what it is you want to do, and then always kind of keep an eye on what the end goal is. And for success, what I really have learned over the years is that my definition of success is not yours, and it's not the next person's. And like if I speak to a woman who's CFO at a bank, maybe she's attained success as CFO. Maybe she doesn't want to be or aspire to be CEO. And I can't impose my idea of success on her. It's like, well, why don't you want the next job, the top job? Maybe she's just happy with that. So, and everybody has to define it themselves.
And I couldn't agree with you more on that. I try to remember that when I'm working with people, that I not impose my own standards of success or my work ethic on other people, because when I do, that's usually a recipe for failure. So with experience, I've learned to keep some of that to myself. So I want to talk a little bit about, the creative process, because you're in such a creative world. And I get this sense that sometimes people think people are born creative and it just comes naturally to them. My experience in having worked with some creative people is just like what you were talking about. It requires hard work, perseverance, and resiliency. Take us behind the curtain, if you will, and tell us your thoughts about the creative process.
Oh, thank you, Regina. There's nothing that makes me crazier than people who think that, you're so creative. You're such a good writer. It just comes out that way. And I just want to scream, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. You can Google the creative process. There's 5 steps. So you have to prepare. And preparing is about doing your research and gathering your data and learning everything you can learn about a topic, which is why I love journalism so much, because it forces me to learn something new every time I'm writing a story. Journaling sometimes is part of the preparation process, just kind of trying to draw out maybe internal memories or thoughts on a particular topic. And then there's the incubation phase, and that's, okay, I've read 3 books on this subject. I've pulled all this data. I've absorbed it all. Set it down and go do something else. And that something else might take days, but go for a walk, clean your house. This is why writers usually have clean houses right before a deadline. Just set it aside, and you can mull those things, but should be doing something else. And then there's the illumination phase of creativity, and that's where the aha moment. And for some people that comes in the middle of the night, not for me personally, but for others. Sometimes it comes when you're on a walk, or mostly for me, it comes when I'm going through the notes. And that's usually when I recognize that there's some pattern that I hadn't seen or noticed before. And that pattern kind of informs either the structure of the piece or, my approach to it. And so then, you go through and do the hard work of writing it. Then you've got your evaluation stage where you kind of think about what you were hoping to learn in the beginning. How does the research, the data, the writing, how does that line up to what you thought of going in? And then there's the validation stage. And this is the really scary part for writers, especially when you take your work and you hand it to somebody else and say, okay, take a look at this. Tell me what you think. Did I achieve what I was trying to achieve? Does it hold together? And get that feedback from somebody else or several somebodies.
Well, first of all, I think that process could work for anyone, even for someone who may be looking at their own career or what they want to do next. And what I love about what you said at the end is there's an element of vulnerability. And I believe that our personal power comes from that vulnerability. So, love what you said about that creative process and can see many applications in many different areas, including career.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about your career. And in your career, I know you've had the opportunity to work with many different people as a coach and mentor, and I've seen you coach and mentor people in your own organization. So was there a coach or mentor that stood out for you in your career, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, well, of course, Regina, you've been a great coach for me. And
Thank you.
I've appreciated the insights, and we've brought you on to coach young people in our organization as well. I, having come out of my upbringing and having kind of been more of a seat of the pants, kind of, gritty, just get things done, work my way up. I have a tendency to be, I think one of my sources called me like no BS writer, just straight to the point, no BS writing. And sometimes I can be that in my interpersonal interactions too, which is not always good. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. So I have learned through coaching to kind of try to draw my internal diplomat, very small person who lives inside of me, who only sees the light of day every couple of weeks. So I've learned that.
I think there are other people who have hidden away the internal diplomat too. I'm just saying.
I mean, I had a wonderful professor at the University of Minnesota who was really saw me and saw my work for what it is or what I was trying to achieve. And I appreciated that greatly because the university writing program that I was in was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And it was one of those things where early on, I pondered whether I was in the right place and whether I should quit. Later on, I did find out that everybody else there felt the same way. It wasn't just me. So that was part of the process as well. That vulnerability, that feeling like I'm not good enough. You just kind of fight through that and realize that you're not alone in it. And then I would say Tom, the company owner, has been a good mentor for me, helping me find and rely on that internal diplomat. He's very gracious and diplomatic in our business dealings, and I think I've learned a lot just from watching him.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned the challenge you experienced at the U of N because that segues right into my next question. And I find it interesting in light of the time that we're in, where there's a lot of discussion about this is the great reset, where people are really reevaluating their lives and maybe looking to do something new or different or that they've hidden away in their heart for a long time. So in your early 50s, you're accepted into the highly competitive graduate program in creative writing at the University of Minnesota, which provided a paid teaching fellowship. So tell us what the driving force was behind going back to school, and what would your advice be for someone that might want to pursue either a new career, a new job, or a new passion?
Okay. It's really interesting. When I was applying, there were naysayers in my world who were saying, "Well, what are they going to possibly teach you?" Because I had been an accomplished writer up to that point, and it really wasn't. The program wasn't about teaching me per se, as it was giving me time and space to work on something that I wanted, that meant something to me, and that creative space to kind of try experimental things. So that was important to me. The teaching part was important because I love teaching. I had one of my students tell me I was a natural teacher, and I can parlay that now into mentoring in the workplace. And it was a bucket list thing for me. I wanted to have an MFA in creative writing. And I just felt like I wasn't going to get to the end of my life and not have it. It was something I wanted, and I was willing to go through the pain to get it. So, and that's just part of who I am. If I want something, I will fight for it. And in this instance, I mean, it was a lot of work, and my family was very supportive. And so I would say to anybody who wants to achieve something, whether it's academic or professional, and it requires a lot of hard work and time, you have to get your family on board. And if they're not on board, it's going to make it all that more difficult. So get your family on board and explain to them why it matters to you. And then ignore the naysayers again. And that's like everything. I think the world is set up to not want you to achieve, especially for women. And you know yourself better than anybody else. And so if something that you want, it's important to you, then you should pursue it.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think probably a lot of those listening in or watching today can think about a time when the naysayers tried to convince them otherwise. So we all need to convince and support each other in our journeys. So we are winding down on time, Jackie, but before we go, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to our audience, just one piece of advice as it relates to success, what would that be?
I would say be courageous, and because you just need courage in order to define success for yourself. And then you have to identify your path to it, and you will have to fight for it. And even if you're in the most supportive environment, you will still have to fight for it. Doesn't mean it has to get ugly or dirty. You just have to say, no, this is what I want, and advocate for yourself. And advocacy requires courage.
And I couldn't agree more. So advocacy, if you take nothing away today, advocate for yourself, not only for what you need, but what you want. So thank you so much, Jackie, for being here with us today. That does conclude our interview with Jackie Hilgert. And just a reminder, if you want to learn more about Jackie, you can do so at www.bankbeat.biz/about. And thanks again for being here today, Jackie. And for those of you who are still with us, don't forget to visit reginabarr.com, where you can learn more about upcoming podcasts and other events on the events page. With that, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.